So this video is the most self-indulgent project you will have ever seen on this channel. It's probably gonna get all views, but I don't care. For too long, my own personal hobby has been pushed to the side. Today is the day that obscure lore and insane conversions reign supreme. Welcome to the host of Thorongol. Whether it's Star Wars Legion, Middle-earth, or Warhammer 40k, I've always been drawn to really obscure and unique armies. I absolutely love rocking up to an event with a crazy list full of conversions and paint jobs that gets my buddies talking and more often than not requires an explanation. But I'm also the kind of hobbyist with about 50 projects on the go at any one time. And as my personal hobby time is ever decreasing with work and home life constraints, I've decided 2020 is almost over. I'm gonna drill down and focus in on one hobby project and try and get it completed by the end of the year. So today we're diving into my new army for the Middle-earth strategy battle game, and no matter what system you play, this is pretty whack, so you should be in for a laugh. Now, for those of you who are my Middle-earth viewers, you're well aware of my penchant for the Rohan Horse Lords, but for my Star Wars and Warhammer 40k fans, Rohan is my absolute jam, but with some recent rules changes smacking my list back down the pecking order, I'm in the market for a new Rohan army, and I found myself looking at a period of time in Middle-earth that is almost never seen on the tabletop. Welcome to the host of Thorongol. In the year 2960 of the Third Age, nearly 60 years before the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Thorongol, sire of Theoden, has been king of Rohan for 7 years. His western borders have been invaded by a host of Dunlendings, and he has summoned the Rohirrim to meet them upon the field of battle. But amongst the summoned marshals and lords comes a man unlooked for, Thorongol of the North, a mysterious man with the air of a great lord and a mighty general whose tactical prowess spares many lives and leads to a swift and resounding victory. But rather than return to the halls of Meduseld where fame and fortune await him, Thorongol takes his leave of Thorongol and journeys south. In time he would return to Rohan, but not for many years, and under his true name, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur and King Elessar. Now in today's video we'll be looking at the hobby side of the Force, but rest assured we will be diving into the list build mechanics and seeing the models on the tabletop in a future video. But for now, brace yourself to see hundreds of dollars worth of kits and rare models getting butchered into some of the silliest Rohan conversions you've ever seen. Up first, of course, is Thorongol himself, and we'll be using the brand new plastic Éomer as our base. As Aragorn is riding with the Rohirrim, it makes sense that he would don their garb of war and wear armor befitting the regard in which Thorongol considers him. So Éomer's finely crafted mail is a suitable fit, and the amazing dynamic pose of this model rearing up on horse is perfect for the big centerpiece of the army. You'll notice the horse is armored with barding, so I'll let the wisest of you draw conclusions from that little profile spoiler. With the torso in place, it's time to arm this mighty warrior. The shards of Narsil at this point have not yet been reforged into Andúril, so he carries a simple arming sword in the style of a Ranger of the North. I stole this right hand and blade from an old metal Aragorn from the 2003 box set Heroes of the West. This was pinned to Éomer's right hand at the wrist to maintain the consistent armor style and allow for a really cool sword pose. To really show that this model is Thorongol, I wanted to include the shards of Narsil on the model as well, so I decided to have them in a scabbard slung at his waist. I grabbed a spare metal King Elessar I've been saving for a rainy day and snipped off Andúril at the wrist and filed and trimmed away Aragorn's hand. I glued that to the place where Éomer's Rohan scabbard should go, and with a little green stuff widened the blade to become a sheath. I then glued Éomer's scabbard to the saddle and barding so Thorongol has somewhere to stash his ranger sword. I then pinned the head from the old Aragorn and added a cape from the plastic Easterling cataphract box and blended that all into Éomer's shoulders, sculpting a hood at the same time to really hint at the ranger aesthetic. For the Thorongol dismount, I started once again with the new plastic Éomer, but this time paired it up with Aragorn's ancestor, injured Isildur, grabbing both the head and the arm holding the shard of Narsil, then adding the undersized Glamdring from plastic Gandalf. If Aragorn gets knocked off his horse, he's now ready to dual wield and stab some Dunlendings with his secret family heirloom. Seems legit. With Thorongol complete, it's time to begin on the Rohan heroes serving under King Thorongol, and up first is another kooky conversion starting with the previously unreleased bannerless gambling model. After many guesses over on our Facebook group, I can finally reveal that this lovely sculpt will be representing none other than Thorbold, father of Grimbold and lord of Grimslade. You will notice that he has a horse, and we'll be adding some other interesting war gear too. I did away with the sword arm and instead replaced it with a right shoulder and arm from a normal royal guard that had found its way into my bits box after I stole the spear to convert the old metal Aomer. In a strange twist of fate, this wrist is now joined by the throwing spear from the new plastic Aomer. It was very important to Thorbold that this spear, if we should call it that, was thrusting forward to impale his opponents. So I pinned it in place and then perfected the angle as the glue dried and filled the gap with a bit of green stuff. I also had to widen the armpit to get a little bit more of a nice lancing motion. Now apparently Thorbold is quite a musical fellow, so I sculpted up a little horn and added that to his saddle, and then got very excited when I started musing over how to make his dismount. Those of you who followed the Grimbold livestream will know that the lovely Damien O'Byrne of the GBHL and battle streams in Middle-earth recently sent me over the Helminger's command for Christmas, and the Hornblower was the perfect starting point for Thorbold's dismount. I just had to clip off his axe, drill out the right hand, and give him a spear. I mounted him to one of my Horselord Prairie resin bases that you can get from my online store to give him that extra bit of height, and then equipped him with the second throwing spear from the plastic Aomer kit. To complete the match to the gambling model, I sculpted a Royal Guard horsehair plume on the helmet, which now looks identical to the helmet on Gambling's saddle. I'm not going to lie, this guy might be pretty simple, but he has to be one of my favorite conversions ever. The next character to go under the knife is Fastrid, the sire of Dunhir and the lord of Harrowdale. I wanted to keep finding ways to make these heroes look really unique, to represent the different regions of Rohan that they hail from, so this time I started with a son of Ael. These worked perfectly as I needed an armoured horse to match his profile, but I really wanted to make him look a bit more heavily armoured, so I decided to give him Aomer's helmet from the new plastic kit. But instead of just doing a simple head swap, I decided to use the helmet tucked under the left arm piece, which resulted in the most badass pose ever. I trimmed away the left arm of the Son of Ael with my clippers and then the scalpel, and then bore out the shoulder to mount Aomer's arm. But I then decided that the large bulky shoulder pad had too much lovely detail to lose, and it further up-armored Fastrid, so I carved out the shoulder of the Son of Ael and then mounted the whole arm and resculpted the cloak, flapping in the breeze to cover the join. I found another Royal Guard arm in my bits box that was missing a hand, so I mounted that to his right shoulder socket, and then brought in an old lance from a 2003 Metal Knight of Gondor, who will himself appear very shortly. With a little bit of green stuff, adding the shield to the barding, and then fixing him to one of the epic 40mm Horselord Prairie bases from my shop, we have created an absolute badass. In the middle of the charge, this lad has dropped his shield down onto the saddle hook, whipped off his helmet to feel the fierce breeze of a cavalry charge flowing through his luscious locks. Now there are a few more Rohan heroes in this force, like Thorongol himself, Guthla, father of Gambling, and Folkwine, sire of Daewine, but as I was rushing to get this army ready for a tournament, I decided to just use my normal Theoden, Gambling, and Daewine models for now, but they will definitely be featured in a future update. But there is still a lot of work to do. Up next, we've got the two Rangers of the North that are accompanying young Aragorn, but I've decided to go into more of an armoured aesthetic than their normal models to represent them donning their gear of war and riding with their kinsmen as his bodyguards. So I'm actually going to be using Citadel Guards from Minas Tirith as my starting point. To mount the Citadel Guard on horse, however, I'm going to use the legs of the aforementioned Metal Knight of Gondor. I dunked him into a big pot of metho, and then with an old toothbrush, all of that paint just fell away, and now it's time to chuck him through a guillotine. A razor saw and some clippers made short work of that, although I had to use my clippers to move the left arm up before making the cut through the waist. Now here's a little spoiler of the mounts for this force, which we're going to look at in a little bit, but you'll see that these Minas Tirith knight legs with a little bit of prying open fit perfectly in the saddle. Next we need our top half, so I chose a pose of the Citadel Guard which had just loosed an arrow, as it's an easy cut and it looks supremely badass. Getting through this cut with the razor saw was a bit of work, let me tell you, especially in the dead of night trying not to wake a sleeping baby. But if you widen the join a little bit with the clippers every now and then, it's not too bad. Just be sure to cut below the belt so that we can hide the join really easily. Once I've got those two halves, I pinned them at the spine and picked the perfect rotation and then locked it in place with some glue, leaving a small gap to make sure that the height and the proportions were correct, and then filled it all with green stuff. This doesn't have to look super neat at the back of the model because we're going to fix up that cloak, but for the front you need to resculpt some of the belt and the lower torso plate, but this is an easy sculpt even for a beginner. Let that join fully cure overnight before moving on to the cloak. Now, I am not a pro sculptor by any means, and I've never done full cloaks before, so I just got stuck in. I set up a foundation first, flowing down from the back of the shoulders, and then cut a perfectly capey-sized piece and stitched and blended it over the top. Always keep putting water back on your blade or your sculpting tool to ensure that you don't stick to the green stuff, and because of the flow of the cape sitting over the horse for the initial work, I sculpted against my wet thumbnail until I had the general shape. Then I mounted him to the horse, ensuring the horse was drenched in water, and contoured the cloak to fit the back of the saddle and the horse's rump, and then flicked up the edges of the cloth to create that illusion of the wind moving through the fabric. Once that was fully dry, I went back in and added the hood, and I noticed that I'd left a few tool marks and fingerprints all over the green stuff. Trent from Miscast, a true wizard of sculpting, suggested that I use some milliput thinned down with isopropyl alcohol to smooth and finish that surface, which filled in all of those imperfections perfectly. So cheers for that, dude. With the mounted version done, I simply added a hood to another foot Citadel Guard for the dismount and sculpted a tiny star to pin both of their cloaks about their necks. The next hero represents Halberd in his youth, so I decided to use the Baragon model for the dismount as the face is so full of character, and I simply added a hood and a star. Then for his mounted counterpart, he has donned a helmet and begins life as a Knight of Minas Tirith. To match up the war gear, we need a sword and a bow in hand, so I picked a pose that had his left hand holding the reins in a fist away from the horse. I then drilled out that hand and slotted in a bow from a plastic warrior of Minas Tirith. Then in his lance hand, I added a metal sword from the bits box, which matched well enough, and I believe it's from the aforementioned metal Aomer spear conversion. Man, this army is like a museum of all of my conversion bits. The mounted model of course needs a cloak and a star, which I made in the same way as before, and I also added some detailing to his Knight of Minas Tirith helm to make it match the Citadel Guard aesthetic. You'll see when these are painted up that the breastplate and the helm will be a lovely steel. These are heirlooms of Arnor that have been passed down the generations, but the rest of the armor will be done up in leathers to get that lovely hybrid armored ranger aesthetic. That's all the hero conversions for the time being. It's finally time to talk about the horses. Now, all Rohan players know the pain of snapped horse ankle syndrome, and it is incredibly bad with mounted Royal Guard, as the riders are metal and all the Rohan horses are plastic. So for a long time, I've been wanting to upgrade the horses of my Royal Guard to the incredible steeds of the old 2005 metal cataphract box that is now out of production and replaced by the plastic cataphracts. The new kit has some nice options, but the old metal horses are way cooler, and I've slowly been accruing them over the last 2 years for this army and my Easterling Cardish Wainrider force that you'll see here on the channel in 2034. A big shout out to Charles Tricker, who recently sent me this box you see here for a super fair price, and a shout out to my lads Odie and Tristan Hemsley, who have been spurring me on with their own cataphract Royal Guard conversions. Hashtag real rides for Royal Guard. Let's get it trending, people. So the first thing to do is to remove my metal Royal Guard from their plastic horses, which wasn't too bad as they've all been glued down with super glue. If you have any trouble, throw it in the freezer and it will go super brittle and they'll crack right off. A couple of them had bent resin swords from traveling in my army case in the Aussie heat, so a quick hot coal dip and they're all ready for remounting. Now I'll be magnetizing all of these cav just in case I can't find enough of the old metal cats for my Cardish army, so I'm seeding 2 magnets into each horse and each rider. Once you've drilled out the corresponding holes, always glue in your magnets using the object that you're joining to ensure you're not messing up your polarities. I kept mine all the same on every iteration so that any rider can go on any horse. For the 6 Royal Guard steeds, I also had to carve away some of the strapping on the cataphract horse to allow the cloak to sit fully flush, but I was able to keep that little bit of extra bling for my 2 mounts for the Rangers. Once all the riders were magnetized, I glued up the rest of the cataphract legs, filled any gaps with green stuff, and mounted them all to the 40mm Horselord Prairie bases from Zorpazorp.com. I absolutely love these bases. I'm pumped to see a whole army of them finally, and it's really nice mounting to solid resin bases when you've just got so much metal going on in the model above. I had to use a couple of cataphracts from my second-hand pile to get the full 8 done, which needed a little bit of stripping, and I also had to cannibalize a Rohan horse to get a few extra plastic legs and add that to some missing spots on the cataphract, but that actually just ended up increasing the pose variety. So, there is part 1 on the journey to assemble the host of Thorongol. In future episodes, I'll be doing a focus on some really easy horse painting techniques, breaking down the actual list itself and running it at a tournament, and of course, painting up all these cool conversions. So I hope you guys enjoyed that insanely self-indulgent bit of hobby, but it, it's Christmas and I wanted to finally get one of my own projects started. Let me know down in the comments which profiles you think these heroes will be representing. There's quite a few little ideas have been swirling around, so it'll be cool to see what you guys think, and I'll have the next couple of videos out in this series before Christmas, so smash that subscribe button. Cheers guys, I'll see you in the next one.